Here's the thing about moving through a collapsed environment that most people don't understand until they're already in the situation that kills them. Your shelter has defenses. It has alarm systems, barricades, exit routes, and whatever fortification you've managed to build around it over days or weeks. It has the advantage of being a known space. You know where the threats can come from, you've planned for them, and you've slept in it enough times to navigate it blind. The moment you step outside, all of that disappears. You're in a space you don't control, moving through terrain that other people know better than you do, carrying whatever you're carrying with no security layer between you and anyone who decides you look worth engaging. You are, at that moment, as exposed as you will ever be in the entire collapse environment. And most people move like it's still peacetime. They take the direct route because it's faster. They move at predictable times because habits are comfortable. They carry their load visibly because there's no other way to carry it. They move alone because splitting up feels like a waste of resources. And they get found, followed, ambushed, or robbed in ways that could have been prevented entirely if they'd understood one thing. In a collapse, movement is the tactical problem. Everything else is the environment you return to when you solve it correctly. Here are the 7 movement mistakes that get you killed between point A and point B and what you replace them with. Mistake 1. Moving at predictable times. This is the most common movement error and the one most consistently exploited by anyone operating in your area with predatory intent. Humans are creatures of habit. The pull toward routine is biological. The brain rewards predictable behavior with reduced cognitive load, and reduced cognitive load feels like efficiency. In a stable environment, that efficiency is real. In a collapse environment, it is a targeting beacon. If you leave your shelter every morning between 8 and 10 a.m. to conduct your water run, anyone who has observed you for 3 consecutive days knows you will be at a specific location at a specific time with your hands occupied, your attention on the task, and your guard calibrated to a route you've walked before. The ambush doesn't require sophisticated planning. It requires showing up where you will be before you are there. The replacement is randomized departure, not just varying the time, the day, the route, the apparent purpose, and the load you're carrying. The person observing you should not be able to construct a predictive model of your movements from 3 days of observation. Every departure should look meaningfully different from the one before it, including decoy exits that establish no real pattern, observe the environment, and return without completing an original purpose. Randomization is cognitively demanding and emotionally unsatisfying. The cost is worth paying because the alternative is not inefficiency. It is becoming a scheduled target for anyone patient enough to watch for 3 days. Mistake 2. Taking the fastest route. The fastest route between your position and your destination is also the most predictable route, the most observed route, and in most environments, the most channelized, the one with the fewest options for deviation if something goes wrong. Channelized movement is what ambush planners look for. A route that passes through a specific alley, crosses a specific intersection, rounds a specific corner. These are choke points where movement is compressed, options are reduced, and the person moving has the least ability to react. The faster the route, the more likely it passes through these compressing features because speed and directness select for them. The replacement is route planning that prioritizes option density over speed. At every point along your route, you should have at least 2 viable alternatives if the path ahead becomes compromised. This means knowing the terrain at a level of detail that takes time to develop what's behind which buildings, which fences have gaps, which routes look impassable but aren't. That knowledge is built through deliberate reconnaissance on low-stakes movements before you need it for high-stakes ones. Slower routes through higher option density terrain take more time and energy. They are not less efficient. They are correctly priced for the environment. The price of the faster route, paid once, is paid completely. Mistake 3. Moving in full view. The default movement pattern for most people in the pre-collapse world was full visibility, walking upright in the open, on roads designed for it, in environments where being seen was normal and being unseen was suspicious. In a collapse environment, visibility is a cost. Every person who can see you is a person who can assess you as a potential resource or target. The fraction who will act on a predatory assessment is not 0, and you cannot know which fraction you're walking past. The replacement is conscious movement management using terrain, building cover, vegetation, shadow, and distance to reduce the number of people who can observe your movement at any given moment. Moving along the sides of structures rather than through open spaces. Pausing at transitions between cover types to observe before moving. Using elevated positions for observation before descending into open terrain. Crossing open spaces at the fastest viable pace rather than walking through them at a comfortable stroll. None of this requires special training. It requires the habit of asking before every step into open space, who can see me right now, and is that acceptable? The person who builds this habit moves through the collapse environment with a consistently lower visibility signature, and lower visibility signature is directly correlated with fewer threat encounters. Mistake 4. Carrying a visible load. The load you're carrying communicates 2 things to everyone who can see you: that you have resources and that your hands and attention are occupied. occupy. Both are liabilities. A visible load is a resource advertisement. In an environment where resource scarcity is the dominant motivating condition for most people you pass, advertising resources is advertising yourself as a target. The larger and more visible the load, the stronger the signal. A person carrying an obviously heavy pack communicates that they have more than they immediately need, that they've been somewhere worth scavenging, and that they're taking that abundance somewhere else, all of which is operationally interesting to anyone in predatory mode. The occupied hands problem is the other half. A person managing a significant load is not fully free to respond to a threat. Movement options are reduced by the weight. Reaction time is compromised by the cognitive task of managing it, and hands, the first thing that needs to be free for any threat response, are occupied. The replacement is load concealment and load management. Bags should not look like what they contain. Loads should be distributed to maintain free hands and balanced mobility. When moving through observed terrain, the load should not be the most visible thing about you. Route planning should include rest and consolidation points where load can be set down, the environment observed, and movement resumed under better conditions. Mistake 5. Moving solo without a plan that accounts for being solo. Solo movement is not automatically wrong. There are situations where moving in pairs creates more risk than it eliminates, making the group larger and more visible, requiring coordination that slows movement, creating dependencies if one person is compromised. What is wrong is moving solo without a plan, specifically accounting for solo vulnerabilities. The solo mover has no one watching their back, no one to notice the person who fell in 80 meters behind them, no one to cover the approach from the side while attention is on the path ahead, no one to create uncertainty in a potential threat's mind about whether engaging one person means engaging two. The solo movement plan addresses these vulnerabilities explicitly. Frequent direction changes and pauses that let you observe whether anyone has adjusted their movement to match yours. The pattern that identifies a tail. Route selection that passes through natural observation points where following at close distance becomes visible. Behavioral signals established with someone at the destination. Expected return time. What to do if the return is significantly late. What communication means the move went wrong. None of these eliminate every risk. They reduce the specific vulnerabilities to a manageable level. The solo mover who has planned for being solo survives situations that the solo mover who just walked out the door does not. Mistake 6. Not knowing what normal looks like in the area you're moving through. Every area in a collapse environment develops its own ambient normal, the baseline level and type of activity that characterizes it when nothing threatening is happening. What time foot traffic is highest. What typical movement looks like. Pace, direction, load. Which locations are avoided and which are frequented. The person moving through an area without knowing its baseline cannot distinguish a deviation from normal. The silence that means a threat is present. The movement pattern that means they've been identified. The small behavioral changes in people. They pass that signal something is wrong because they don't know what normal looks like. Baseline knowledge requires deliberate investment before high-stakes movement. Low-stakes reconnaissance through areas you'll need to transit observation from distance before entering. Brief passes at low load times to assess the environment. Conversations with traders or network contacts who operate there regularly. This investment costs time and some exposure. It buys the ability to notice when something is wrong before it's close enough to be a direct threat. The signal value of knowing baseline is highest at transitions, entering an area from one that felt normal or leaving an area that felt abnormal. The contrast tells you something. The person who knows the baseline in both areas hears the contrast clearly. The person who has no baseline hears nothing until the situation is already upon them. Mistake 7. Not planning the return before you leave. Most movement planning focuses on the outbound trip. The return gets planned as a mirror image, same route, same timing, adjusted for whatever was acquired. This is how people get ambushed on the way home. The return trip is predictable in a way the outbound often isn't. You left from a known origin at an approximately known time. Anyone who observed your departure knows approximately when you'll return and on what route. The window for a return trip ambush is calculable from the outbound observation alone. The return should be planned as a completely independent movement. Different timing from what observation of the outbound would predict. Different route where terrain allows. Altered appearance where possible. A stop and observe routine at a fixed distance from your origin before completing the return, checking whether anyone is positioned near your shelter who wasn't there when you left. The specific vulnerability of the return is the load. You're carrying more than when you left, which makes you slower, more occupied, and a more clearly rewarding target. The return with a full load is when the investment of an ambush most clearly pays off for the person setting it. Your heaviest load moments should be your lowest visibility moments, which means the return route needs more care than the outbound, not less. Here's the picture all 7 connect to. Movement in a collapse environment is not the gap between survival activities. It is a survival activity, one with a specific threat profile, specific failure modes, and specific practices that reduce the probability of those failure modes operating against you on any given trip. trip. The person who treats movement as logistics is importing a peacetime frame into an environment with different rules. The efficiency they're optimizing for is a cost they're paying in exposure every time they run it. The person who treats movement as a tactical operation, planning it before execution, varying every predictable element, managing visibility throughout, knowing the environment they're moving through, planning the return as carefully as the departure, is running a fundamentally different operation in the same environment. They take longer. They expend more planning energy. They are significantly harder to track, target, and engage. The difference between them, expressed as outcomes over the full duration of a collapse, is not subtle. Move like you're invisible, because the alternative is being visible to the wrong person at the wrong moment. And in a collapse environment, you only get to make that mistake once.